Good evening, and thank you for joining us for tonight's What's the Catch program. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to talk about New Jersey's aquaculture industry. I'd like to begin tonight's presentation with a definition of aquaculture. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations defines aquaculture as the farming of aquatic organisms, including fish, mollusks, crustaceans, and aquatic plants. Farming implies some form of intervention in the rearing process to enhance production. This could be regular stocking, feeding, protection from predators, or other things. Farming also implies individual or corporate ownership of the stock being cultivated. Globally, aquaculture is on the rise. This contrasts with wild fishery harvests, which have remained relatively stable in recent decades. The continued growth of aquaculture is globally significant as a means to increase protein production and meet increasing consumption demands of an ever-growing population. In the US, aquaculture production is valued at $1.5 billion. Although we've been growing slowly, US production ranks only 17th worldwide. Marine species that are produced include oysters, clams, salmon, mussels, and shrimp, with oysters being the highest species by value. From a national perspective, marine aquaculture is important as it enhances coastal resiliency, creates jobs, improves food security and human nutrition, and can be a valuable tool to help restore declining species and habitats. Here in New Jersey, two species are grown and farmed, hard clams and oysters. Farms can be found along the eastern coast bays of the Atlantic shores and in the Delaware Bay on the state's western shore. In 2019, there were about 60 farms that were active in the state. These farms are situated on special areas known as shellfish leases. All are located in pristine waters, and the leases have been specially dedicated by the state for shellfish cultivation. Shellfish farms are just one of many uses of our coastal waters, and shellfish farmers take pride in their role as coastal stewards. Their livelihood depends on a healthy environment. In addition to the food value and economic uplift that shellfish farms provide, they also provide many important ecological services. Shellfish farming is considered one of the greenest food production systems on Earth. While they are in production, clams and oysters will filter and improve water quality, they'll cycle and sequester nutrients, they'll provide important habitat and increase biodiversity, supporting fish populations, both recreational and commercial species. And they can also have an impact to reduce local climate change impacts as the gear and structure of farms reduces wave attenuation and reduces shoreline erosion. The first phase of production occurs in a hatchery where carefully chosen broodstock, parent clams, and oysters are spawned. Tiny larvae are grown under carefully controlled conditions on a diet of cultured algae. Once large enough, these very tiny animals are transferred to land-based nursery systems where flowing seawater provides them with nutrient-rich natural diets to continue to spur their growth. There are a variety of types of land-based nursery systems, including raceways shown in the bottom left, upwellers shown in the middle top, and flupsy systems shown on the right side of the image. The farming methods for grow out on the farm is dictated by the biology and ecology of the species and specific characteristics of the location. Hard clams naturally live in muddier, sandy bottoms in moderate salinity waters. You can see in this image how they're burrowed under the sediment. Their growing period is when the water temperature reaches about 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and that typically occurs from April to November here in New Jersey. They're relatively slow growers, and they would reach market size in 2 or more years. On farms, hard clams are planted as seed under nets to protect them from predators like cow-nosed rays, crabs, drills, and moon snails. Here you can see an image of a farm at low tide, and the farmer is sweeping the macroalgae that fouls the nets off. It can take 3 years to grow a clam to market size, and they're harvested at various sizes and ages. In the marketplace, you might see them noted as little necks, top necks, cherry stones, quahogs, or chowders. Hard clams have been farmed in New Jersey since the 1970s. Production in 2019 was about 6.5 million, and they can be eaten raw, steamed, baked, and in soups and chowders. Okay, moving on to oysters. Oysters are an estuarine species. They prefer hard bottoms, and they're reef builders. So in the wild, young oysters will settle on top of older oysters, cement themselves down, and form an incredible structure that emerges up off the bottom. They grow in similar temperatures to hard clams, but they're found in a much broader range of salinities, ranging from 5 to 40 parts per thousand. Disease has been a major impact on wild oyster populations, and considerable effort has been undertaken to restore wild populations all around the world. Oyster breeding has been important in the development of oyster farming. A great deal of research has been put forth to develop disease-resistant stocks. Doc Hal Haskin was a pioneer in this area. It was his work that led to surviving oysters that could be grown in the presence of disease. On the left image here, you see the results of one of his trials. So he would produce oysters from stocks of oysters that previously had been exposed to the disease and survived. And here you see a comparison between a selected strain on the left and a wild strain that had not been selected after 3 years of grow out. Survival of the selected stocks is much improved over that of wild stocks. This was essential for the advancement of oyster farming here in New Jersey and along the East Coast of the United States. Genetic breeding continues to be important as we increase the viability and vitality of our industry. Traits like fast growth, shell color, heat and cold tolerance are desired. So there's much more work to be done. Here you can see the Rutgers Cape Shore Laboratory Field Station, where much of this breeding work has occurred. The area has a wide tide range, so at low tide, sand flats are exposed. This type of area lends itself well to a type of cultivation called rack and bag culture, a method adapted from France. And it was here that the contemporary oyster farming first emerged in the late 1990s. Here you can see a close-up of the rack and bag culture system. It looks like submarket oysters secured in the bags on the racks. Oyster farming expanded from this lower bay area known as the Cape Shore up and along the Atlantic coast of the state and up the bay into deeper waters. These areas need a different type of cultivation system. You can see very rigorous, robust deep water cages on the left for the upper Delaware Bay, and floating cages and bottom cages for shallow areas along the Atlantic coast. Regardless of the actual site or the method, the young baby oysters that come out of the nursery are going to be contained in fine mesh containers. And during the course of production, those oysters will be handled many, many times as their size sorted for markets, densities are split and volumes are reduced. And the oysters are often washed to keep mud and sediments off them, to keep them from smothering. It's a very labor-intensive process indeed. Oysters are typically harvested at 2.5 inches or larger. And then again, that's entirely dependent on the farmer, what they choose to sell and how they choose to market their oysters. Typically, a production cycle takes 1.5 to 3 years. The end result, high quality half shell oysters. There are now about 30 farms in New Jersey, located in 4 different counties, and the 2019 production was about 5.3 million oysters. So about eating raw oysters. Of course, you just tilt the shell and slurp. But you should know that oysters feed by filtering the surrounding waters, and this influences their taste. They can be salty, sweet, earthy, or grassy. Flavor will reflect the unique conditions of the waters where they're grown, and this can also change seasonally. So if you tried one oyster, you've tried only one oyster, as oyster flavors can vary tremendously from place to place. Oysters are branded and sold with reference to the place they're grown and their flavor profile. This image shows a sheet of a daily availability of oysters from a seafood distributor, Samuels and Sons. And you can see to the left, the brand name, and then the area of origin, and a description of the flavor profile. On any particular day, Samuels and Sons could have up to 80 different varieties of oysters offered from grow out areas all around the country. From a nutritional viewpoint, oysters are quite good for you. They're low in fat, high in protein. They have omega-3 fatty acids and important minerals like zinc, selenium, iron, potassium, and magnesium, as well as vitamins B12, A, and C. The availability of high quality oysters, marketing, and a people's desire for food experiences has created an oyster renaissance. This has been spurred by a growing consumer preference for locally produced seafood and sustainably produced seafood. You can see here an advertisement from a Philadelphia oyster house, which featured local seafood and local oyster farmers from New Jersey. And again, that highlight that we're talking about very fresh, locally produced food, sustainably produced. So I want to mention that at Rutgers University, we've been working to develop cultivation methods for 2 additional species that we hope will be farmed here in the state. That includes the bay scallop and the Atlantic surf clam. So we have trials out now on a number of farms. So hopefully you'll be seeing these treats from the sea in your markets and in your restaurants very soon. If you're interested in learning more about New Jersey shellfish farms, purchasing New Jersey shellfish, you can take a look at this recently produced brochure, Jersey Shellfish Directory. You can find it at the New Jersey Aquaculture Association website, www.njaquaculture.org/find. So I would encourage you to check out these farms. And so finally, in summary, I just want to highlight that shellfish aquaculture provides many economic, social, and environmental benefits. And I love this quote from Chef Barton Seaver in his cookbook for Cod and Country. Barton says, eating farmed oysters is your patriotic duty. They are not just sustainable, they actually help restore depleted ecosystems. So with that, I will leave you with this delicious picture. And I thank you and appreciate your time this evening. Happy to answer any questions.